Hello, everyone, and welcome. It is Monday, February 6th, and we have reached week two. You have finished your first round of assignments, submitting your game composition for the 2D platformer project, and also submitting the looping technique, which has you working on a couple of different approaches to creating loops for gaming music. So, today's session, we are going to start out with a discussion of the 2D platformer submissions for peer review. So, each week you have the opportunity to, once you have completed your game composition, to submit your work in the for peer review and feedback. We have 6 submissions here for today, and we will talk about each one of those in detail. You each week, as you submit your work, please submit it also to the peer review assignment so we can go through it in a lot more detail. Not only for those that submitted, not only do we go through it piece by piece, and you can kind of see me talk my way through the submissions here, but for everybody else who didn't submit, it gives a peek inside or a look inside some of different approaches for these submissions to give you different ideas in the way you might head in your own direction. So after doing this for our first round of submissions. Hopefully that inspires you to submit again for next week. So we have our peer review. Then the second half of our session this afternoon will be a discussion of the new week 2 assignments. You are going to be doing the sound design for 2D platformer, and you will also do a game capture. You will place your music in the game. If you need to make any changes to the soundtrack after we talk our way through and do some peer review, or if there's any updates and changes you need to make to your own project, you can make all of those changes, and then you will take your music and your sound effects and put them in a very specific location to make the files play back and work correctly in the game. So we'll talk about all of that and what that entails, and then also get into the game capture process of using QuickTime and a program called Loopback to show off and demonstrate your music and sound effects working in the game. So once you've created everything, you place it in the game, you test it out a couple of times, make sure it works, go back and make any changes, and once you have everything finalized, you can do the game capture and submit that, and we can check them out and see what they all look like. So those are some of the assignments that we have in store, and I will, of course, get into that in a lot more detail as we head into our session. Hello, Courtney. Welcome to the session. And as I mentioned earlier, we are going to start out over here in Logic. So this Monday session is going to be like the rest of our Monday sessions in that we're going to start out with a discussion of the previous week's assignments. So you have the opportunity to submit your weekly assignments along with the peer review and feedback. We'll load all of those up, and I will talk about them in general, and then we'll go through one at a time and discuss the different points that we hear. And then in the second half of our Monday sessions, we'll get into the new assignments each week. So that's the kind of structure now that we've done our first round of assignments. This kind of gets us into the flow for the rest of the month, so you can have a good idea of what to expect. So we have 6 submissions here from 2D Platformer. And the way that this is organized, I have three columns. Well, you see number one, there's the six submissions. With your, if you have submitted, you should see your the name on each one of the tracks there. The first column is all of our ending cues. So we have three ending cues per each submission. Then over here, I have three intro cues from everybody. And then I have three main loops. And they're only in this order because this is how it imports alphabetically into Logic. So we'll probably start out talking about the main loops so we can hear the instrumentation. Since this is going to be the main thing that plays through most of the game, it really establishes how things are going to work and sound. And so we will start out listening to these main loops, and then we'll go into the intros and endings and talk about how those are supposed to sound and how they're supposed to work. So I'll start out talking about each one of these categories as a whole, and then we'll dive into each one of these one by one. So the main loops, the first and foremost, they need to loop. There should be no gaps or fades or pops or clicks or anything really to indicate to the player that they are caught up in a loop. You want to lose the player in that loop as much as possible. So really strong changes in the beginning, first half and the second half, typically like instrumentation changes. Gaps like these three files here are going to be an issue because there's going to be a bit of silence at the end of each one of these, each pass that it goes around. Typically this might come in when you have include audio tail set up in the bounce. So here, if you choose include audio tail, if there's any sort of reverb or delay or decay of the instruments, it'll keep the recording going even after the endpoint that you've set. So you always want to turn that off, and you want to make sure you make nice clean bounces. So these three look fine, these look good, these look good. These have the gaps in them, these look good. These look good except for the middle one here. The main loop 2 looks quite a bit lower in volume, so we'll have to see what changes there. So we're looking for looping as one element. Next, we'll talk about instrumentation, then we'll talk about composition and mix. So instrumentation, we want this to feel like one band playing one song cohesively from beginning to end. So even though there are three main loops, three variations of intros and endings and main loops, we need to feel like they are all one song, one single band playing the same instruments throughout each one of them. So we want to make sure that the instrumentation is similar enough from one cue to the next that it feels like one whole composition. Sometimes what I will get is that it sounds like somebody's switching between presets and ultrabeat and on whatever synthesizer they're using, and there's really wildly different instrumentation in each cue. So want to watch out for that. But you can have changes. Maybe a different instrument takes the lead or something gets added or subtracted. You probably don't want to change instrumentation within the 8 bars of a cue, like adding a new instrument will often cause not so many an issue, but becomes a really obvious signpost as to where you are in the loop if the drums come in and out or a new lead instrument gets added. So pretty consistent instrumentation through intros, main loops, and endings. Compositionally, they need to be in the same key. They need to be in the same tempo, so it doesn't really have a sudden shift as you move between the different main loops. And then we're looking for strong development over the course of 8 bars. So where the instrumentation is going to change, the composition can certainly vary. Melodic development is a strong aspect of this, making sure you use the full 8 bars to develop your melody instead of just repeating a 4-bar phrase twice, or even worse, a 2-bar phrase or a 1-bar phrase 4 times or 8 times, just repeating the same thing over and over again. So you want to encourage development in your melody throughout. Same thing with your progression, your bass line, your harmonic chord progression. Having changes in variation, especially from one cue to the next, so that it's not just the same exact backing track with a different melody on top. So some variation to the composition through the main loops. And finally, the mix. Ultimately, you do have control over the mix because you're making both the music and the sound effects. You do not want to completely blast the or bounce a very hot signal or overloaded or distorted signal, anything too big, right? So that there's no room left over for the rest of the sound effects in the mix. On the other end of that, you don't want to bounce out wave files that are so tiny or small, low in volume, that they get masked or just kind of overlapped by all of the other sounds in the game. So it's a balance in there somewhere. Things like this, the dynamics of this cue are a bit off-putting because it kind of looks like it's just shaved off at the top. Looks like it's hitting a compressor or limiter a bit too hard. Overall, consistent levels is really the main key. This one looks a little bit smaller in volume. Like I said, this one looks a little bit smaller in volume, but the other ones look pretty consistent overall. Going into the intros and the endings, the main thing with the intros is that they need to build. They need to rise in intensity, and wherever they end needs to be at the same strength and power and intensity as the main loops, because they're going to transition into that smoothly. So these look like they build a little bit. This third one looks like it's more appropriate for the level of the main loops. But even then, these look a little bit lower in volume. Those look like they're at the appropriate volume. These, I guess, are appropriate because these levels are lower overall. Again, there's gaps in these intro files. That's going to cause an issue as it transitions into the main loop. And the rest of these, well, these look, well, we'll have to listen to them overall. But you want to make sure that it is a consistent transition and a smooth transition from the intros into the main loops. Use the full 2 bars to build intensity and anticipation heading into the main loop. You need to use all the instruments that are found in the main loops. Sometimes I'll get intros and endings that are missing drums, or they're missing the lead melodic instrument. And somebody sat down for a couple of bars before they joined into the mix. So again, for consistency, you would want to use similar instrumentation between intros, main loops, and endings. And 3 endings. Number 1, the endings need to end. They need to resolve the music. So drums kind of, oh, you know what? Hold on just a sec. Let me get you set up here. How about I share the screen? That'll help. With the 3 ending cues, you are going to resolve the main loops musically. So drums do a roll to a final kick and a crash or some strong ending. Chords resolve back to the tonic. Melody resolves probably back to the tonic. Everything hits that last note and chord and resolves and fades to silence. You need to make sure that you leave enough room to fade to silence also. These look like they reach silence. Depends on, I mean, maybe you can cut these off a little bit, shorten them up. Depends on if there's maybe a little bit of reverb. I mean, if you have a really long reverb tail and cymbal crash or something like that, you may want to leave that in there. But if you can just cut off the ends, if they're just silence there, that works. So these get reach silence, these reach silence. These don't look like they actually hit silence before they get cut off. So we want to avoid that, but we'll have to listen to it. These look like they're good. These look good. These look pretty close. So we'll listen to all of those. The beginning of the ending cue needs to be at the same level as the main loop. So intros rise to the main loop. Main loop is at a constant level all the way through each one, and the endings resolve and fade to silence, or finally reach silence. Okay, that's enough chatting. Let's actually listen to something here. Check. All right. First off, let's make sure that we can all hear this. Let me play this one. Can you give me a heads up in the chat that you can hear this? Working for you? You can also still hear me, as I think I can bring this down. You can still hear me, and then we can take a listen to it. Okay, so we're going to start out here with these 3 main loops. Let's just go ahead and listen to those. Number 1, I really like the energy through it. Works with the pacing to fit the energy of the game. The one main thing that I hear this. Let's start with this first one here. Again, is adding the instrumentation in the second half. So we have 1 drums percussion, and then in the second half, another drum pattern enters. And really what that does is it kind of splits everything into 2 4-bar loops. So maintain the similar instrumentation all the way through. I think this does the same idea. So there's lots of bells and chimes, maybe glockenspiel in there, and from one cue to the next, especially main loop 1 and 2 are quite similar to each other. The third one has enough change in it. There's changes in the drum patterns from one to the next, but the chord progression feels quite similar, especially since it is kind of a fast and based off an arpeggiated phrase that repeats as the chord changes. So really bringing out a strong melodic lead, which I think is in there. It's just kind of buried in with everything else, or maybe changing the timbre of the sound so it really kind of sticks out a bit more. Will help that. Again, watch the level in the mix, or the change in the mix of this cue. These look like they have more appropriate dynamics than the third one here. Let's check out these 3 intros. I'll turn that up. Cool. I definitely like intros 2 and 3, a bit stronger overall. Takes one a little bit longer to build up. There's a bass in here that doesn't seem to be as prevalent in the, kind of seems to disappear in the main loops. I like what it does there overall. So just for consistency's sake, the bass seems to stick out there. 3 endings. Cool. That works. Interesting texture there. All right, I like endings. I think I like one a little bit more in that 1 and 3 are more musically structured. 3 I think stops a little quickly. Ending 1 stops on beat 1 of bar 2. So 1, 2, 3. 1 2 3 4 1 2 1. So it hits on beat 1 of bar 2. This one ends a little sooner. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So maybe have just one little extra beat in there instead of ending it in bar 1. And this one sounds a little too much like a sound effect. It's a little too abstract. I like what it does, but I think it's missing like the drums and missing more of the musical resolve. So it could be interesting if it did something like and then went all into that interesting effect as it kind of tailed out. So maybe make work on the musical resolve portion of the 3 ending cues. But I think instrumentation, energy-wise, it works. Just some tweaks to the composition to make it consistent and work in all the variations, kind of the interactive nature of it. All right, good to start with. Let's try the next one here. Again, the energy of it, the speed and pacing of it works well for a fast-paced action game. The first thing that I notice when I'm listening to it, and I guess one thing I should point out is that in the Go-To Training broadcast, the stereo broadcast of the audio signal I think goes down to mono, and it's a little bit lower quality overall. So the screen capture that I do live for the archive works and sounds quite a bit better overall. But one of the first things that I notice when I put on the headphones is that it's quite mono in the mix. It's kind of flat right there. It really sounds like everything is straight up and down the middle. So I think what the composition is suffering most from is the mix. I think the elements might be there, but it needs to be brought out a little bit more. So another thing that I heard was the repetition of the phrasing really feels like it's just a similar phrase that changes with the chord progression, and having a strong melodic lead will help provide more variation over the cue. Like this first one here, chord change, and then it basically hits those same chords again in the second half. And there is a lead synth in there, but it's kind of buried far back and often moves with the chord changes also. So if it had more motion to it. This one, it's more noticeable, but it's still kind of buried back in the mix. So you can get away with a bit more repetition in the chord progression as long as the melody is doing something interesting and is kind of forward in the mix. 3 intros. Okay, those work out very well. That's the energy level of the of what the lead line should be doing in the main loops, because there's much more movement all through here. And you also have the roll and the build-up of the intro of the percussion to help the intro cues. So those work out nicely. And 3 endings. Cool. Excellent. So you could definitely get rid of the silence through that cue. All right. Ending-wise, intros and endings work out very well. And I think listening to those, having that other synth, that main synth lead line on there, makes me realize that it definitely is in there. It's just buried farther back. So if it was more forward in the mix and had a little more animation to it, it would work out like these do. All right. Excellent stuff there. I'll try the next one here. Courtney, if you have any questions as we go, please let me know. All right, 3 main loops. All right, I like what the brass and the woodwinds are doing there. Some of the harmonies work very well. The bass line, the bass synth kind of throws me off a bit. It feels kind of buried in reverb or kind of far back in the mix. It kind of what is that bass instrument? Is that some brass or bass guitar? Yeah, tuba. So it sounds almost like it's very what's the word I'm looking for? Brappy or like wah wah wah. It doesn't have much tone to it. And I think it's kind of buried in the mix there. So if it had a stronger attack that was more tonal along with the key, it's just more low-end bass. So the rest of the brass, there are some dissonance that's happening, some intervals to watch out for between the different layers. But when you have the solo instruments in and then the other brass comes in to support it, towards the ends here, these little phrases, those work out really well. And the theremin sounds almost like a support instrument. If it's going to be the lead, I would typically think that would be more of a lead instrument, but some of what the brass is doing works really well as the lead. It could just be there for textural effect. Would probably work on the mix and kind of widen out with a little bit more panning some of those instrument parts. Also a little more power from the drums. They're kind of far back in there also. So I think, again, mostly what it is mix. There is some issues in the harmonies, but what you're doing melodically works quite well. Let's do this. I might avoid the snare roll in each cue. Like, you can certainly have it in one of them or two of them, but you might want to have some more variation there. Let's do this. Just want to see how these work together. Come on. Okay. I was thinking that maybe the rhythm of these might cause an issue as it goes into the main loops, but we'll see. Yeah, when you have these last two hits, that helps. 2, 3, 4, 3, 4. Yep, that works. All right. So yeah, change up the percussion through there. The rest of the instrumentation works to build up. I think. Yeah, you probably just, you don't need to use the entire 2 bars for the music. Probably hit that first beat of bar 2 to give you enough time to end everything. Or you could hit it on another location. Let's see. Boom. 1, 2, 3, boom. Well, that one works. Probably beat 2 of bar 2. Yeah, if you hit beat 2 of bar 2, that would probably give you enough time to stop pretty quick and then get to silence. Yeah, and if you need to, and this goes for everybody overall, with the ending cues can be longer than 2 bars as long as the music resolves in those 2 bars. So the music goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Well, let's do this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. Boom. And then, as long as the music ends there, and anything past that point is just decay and reverb tail and fade and all that sort of stuff, you'll be all right. But you could probably end those ending cues just a bit earlier. All right. So instrumentation, I'd say mainly the tuba. Bring the drums out of the mix. Work on some changes on the intros and endings just to make it kind of smooth out the transitions from one to the next. Good stuff. All right, let's take a listen here. I'll have to jump around a little bit here. Try this one. There's a lot of inconsistencies in the rhythm and a lot of dissonance through the harmony and melody. just not in a very consistent phrasing of the melody. Have a strong kick snare pattern, kind of map out the overall progression, and stick to consistent rhythmic phrasing that allows you to easily jump from one cue to the next. Yeah, I mean, it's 8 bars. It's just... This one definitely needs drums. That's why it's quite a bit lower overall. Especially maybe for the game in week 3, kind of in the second half of the month, it's much more action-based, and this sort of intensity and dissonance might work a bit better there, but this one needs to be a little bit more kind of clear, structurally sound, and rhythmically consistent through the cues. Also, watch out for the repetition. It really repeats similar phrasing. Yeah, it just kind of stops the phrase and right in between. Make sure you use all the drums and percussion in each one of the cues. Well, these sound almost just like endings. Yeah, these sound like either 2-bar phrases or endings. They don't really feel like they build up into the cues. Well, that one resolves pretty well. They lose the rhythm overall, but they do resolve back to the tonic. So work on the mainly having a strong rhythm in there will allow you to loop these cues a little bit easier and create some consistency from one cue to the next. All right, 3 main loops. Pretty solid development through each one of the cues. Great energy. Works well as loops and works well to transition from one to the next. Maybe just a little bit more clarity in the melody. This third one doesn't seem to have much melody at all. Mostly progression. Or just follows right along with the chord progression. And this is kind of bounces back and forth between the kind of piano line and the trumpet line. Is it piano? Some keyed instrument. Sometimes I want to think it's the keys, sometimes I want to think it's the brass. So really kind of more focus on the lead melody, even if it does change from one cue to the next. Intro 3 works out the best because of the rise in the beginning. 1 and 2 seem to kind of move in a downward direction, almost feel like endings because they feel like they want to resolve to the tonic. I could, yeah, feels too close to endings. So certainly a rise, rising up to the octave, or maybe hanging on a 4 or 5 chord allows you to build up towards something, waiting until the transition into the main loop. 3 endings. That was a little quick. There you go. So that actually works because you just lost. Although the difference is I hear these and they sound more like musical endings. These don't necessarily sound bad as this does. Not that that's really an incorrect idea. I would maybe just make it consistent. I would either make all 3 of these like 1, 2, 1, and 2, where it's let's say 2 is the best out of them. Ending Q ends a little fast. That feels like it's a 16th note off or something. Or make 1 and 2 more like 3, where it's just not so much of a musical resolve as it is a phrase that says, hey, oh no, you lost. So whichever direction you go, I think the endings work. Intro 3 works. 1 and 2 sound more like endings. Probably take intro 1 and make that ending 3 and make another intro there. However you want to handle that. So great ideas in the instrumentation and changes, but just some tweaks to how it's all connecting together. And the third one here, the last one here. Let's try this one. The instrumentation works out quite well, cohesive in its style and approach. You'd have to really work on the fiddle and the banjo part seem kind of synthetic or mechanical overall. You'd really have to work on the performance and the like the variation in the velocity, just to tweak it and make it a bit more realistic overall. Again, watch the levels of this one. I think you could probably just create a similar power and intensity in this second cue. But I do like the changes. I like that it centers around an idea, but different instruments come forward and back in the mix. 3 intros. Three, again, sounds a little too much like an ending. Probably wouldn't, although I know it's like waiting for the drop into the main loops, but starting out with just the drums and hitting that just a single chord. It doesn't work out as solidly as these do, but the only thing with these is that 1 and 2 are kind of similar in that 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4. That same 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. That kind of pattern to it. So just vary, I don't know, the second one or something to work a bit better. 3 endings. All right. The endings musically, they resolve, they work well. The challenge here is it sounds like, okay, so you have different instrumentation in these, or a different kind of focus or lead, and the endings seem to need to be connected to a specific main loop. Like that's big piano chords. This is the banjo. There's some other piano chords. So basically, you don't want to have any issue the fact that intro 1 goes to main loop 2 that goes to ending 3, or intro 2 goes to main loop 3 which goes to intro or ending 1. Like the like 1 is not going to go to intro 1 is not going to go to main loop 1 is not going to go to ending 1, or at least not all the time. So just want to make sure that if you do change instrumentation, that you're not really changing instrumentation that drastically. You're just focusing on one element or the other, that it still makes sense when you mix and match them together. All right. So we saw some great ideas there. Most of what we heard and what we talked about was not, oh no, it's not working, let's start it all over again. It was, hey, let's take the ideas that you have there and manipulate them and improve on those ideas so that it works in its kind of best form for the game. So you should take, you can take any of these points and feedback and you can apply them to any changes that you need in your compositions for the rest of your submissions for this week, and your game capture and your demo reel, and overall just improve the quality of the project. So if you have any questions on any of that feedback, or if you want to discuss any parts of that further, message me, let me know. We can set up a time to discuss, or we can chat back and forth, or email, or whatever needs to happen, just if you need any more clarification on your own composition. And again, hopefully that encourages those that didn't participate in this first round. Now that you see what it's all about, it would certainly encourage you to participate going forward for our submissions the rest of the month. All right, so we'll round out the peer review portion and head into your week 2 assignments. Oops. And so you're going to be continuing with Angry Bots this week. You have the opportunity to revise and change any of your compositions, but the brand new assignments are the sound design for 2D platformer, so that you kind of finish out the audio for the game. Now the audio, music, and sound effects will all be custom, your own work, your own version of all of that. So we'll talk about how the sound effects will be created, and we'll also talk about testing your music and sound effects in the game, and capturing the doing a video capture of your music and sound effects working in the game, and then submitting all of that stuff for the composition description that happens also this week. So Let's start here with the sound design. Hopefully, you've taken the opportunity and played through the game a couple of times. The sounds that exist in the game are the default sound effects that are provided with the project, and you have the opportunity to change them all and make them custom your own sound effects. Your own custom sound effects, probably a better way of saying that. So when you download this assignment, you get access to this PDF, and it has information about how you can approach and build these sound effects. Excuse me. I would suggest that you use and reference the original sound effects when building your own sound effects. You're not going to bounce them and actually use them in your own sound design, but you can use them as a reference and as a guide. So let's talk a little bit about putting your music and your sound effects into the game and getting access to the original sound effects and talk about how you might approach this project. So let's see here. Let me find a copy of the game itself. Put that down. Do this. Okay. So here is a copy of 2D Platformer. And this is the application that you received. And once you have created and composed, maybe revised your music, eventually you'll do all the sound effects, you can place those into the game and test them out. So if I click on 2D Platformer, I'm going to right click and choose Show Package Contents. Pretty much most applications on a Mac are really folders that contain all of the files to that application. And if we do Show Package Contents, it actually shows you what's in that file. In there, nicely, appropriately named, there's a folder called Contents. Inside of Contents, you will find Data. Inside of Data, you will find Streaming Assets. And in there, you're going to find two folders, Music and Sound Effects. Now, I wouldn't necessarily expect you to have that path memorized, but it is available in the documentation. But you should always place your music into the game and check out how it works. So again, you go to Contents, you go to Data, you go to Streaming Assets, and you'll find two folders, Music and Sound Effects. This is where you place all of your music. Maybe you've already done this. You can take your 9 files, put it into this folder, and the game expects that these files are going to be there named exactly like this. And if they aren't, then there would be no music. So you place the music in the game, you test it out, see how it works. Maybe you need to make some tweaks to the music. Maybe you need to change the mix. Maybe you need to change how they loop, how they transition. But a large part of all of this is certainly testing out your music in the game. You can also access the original sound effects from the game. And when you start this project, I would suggest that you, we'll start here with a blank logic session. Don't close. We'll just start out with one audio track. No, that's not it. How about this? And we'll close that. Don't save. All right, so we got a brand new logic session that we're going to build sound effects and create one blank track, and then we're going to go get all of these sound effects, and we're just going to place them on that track. You can navigate into the game application, place them on that track. We want them all to be on one track, so that they're just kind of back to back. There are all sorts of crazy different formats, so you just want to hit convert file so that they will all convert to your session sample rate, which is probably 16-bit 44.1. And there you go. You have the original sound effects. Now, for your sanity, you probably want to space these out to give you a bit more room, and I'm not going to go through and do all of that, but That will give you some room to do all of your design. And then I would create a couple of blank tracks right below this. And you can use these as your guide. Now, again, when you actually bounce these will be muted. You will not actually use these sound effects as part of your own sound effects. It's really obvious. We hear the sounds all the time. You can hear them even when they're layered in with a whole bunch of other stuff. They stick out pretty regularly. So we have the original sound effects, but you can reference these as a guide. See how long the files are, how loud they are, the general shape of the waveform. You can hear them and reference them, listen to how they sound, and build your own versions of those. They don't have to be exactly the same, but it gives you a solid indication. And now I'm going to completely cheat here and just drag these down. But assuming that, of course, these would be your own WAV files, but you would build your own version of these down below there, and you create, I don't know, 2 or 3 or 4, probably, let's say 4 layers of sounds to build this sound. And then you have a guide. It doesn't have to be exactly the same shape and waveform and loud level and duration or time, but it gives you a guide of what they might sound like overall. So let me go back here. Sourcing your sound effects. Where might you find good sources of sound effects? Well, you've already used Westar Music for your looping assignment, so you are familiar with that. And along with all of the music that's available, there is access to sound effects libraries. They have some Sound Ideas libraries, some Hollywood Edge libraries that you can get access to that have some pretty professional sound effects that you can use. You could also check out freesound.org. Freesound.org is a community-driven website, community-driven sound effects library. So there are lots of different sounds available here. They are free. Some of them do come with some sort of Creative Commons licensing that you might have to check out. But for our purposes and educational purposes, most of the time these are really, you really have no problem using them. There are lots and lots and lots of sounds on freesound.org. There are a whole bunch of very, very bad sounds on freesound.org. You do kind of have to, since it's like community driven and it's open to the wide open internet, it's got tons of stuff, but it's got tons of bad stuff on there. And so you have to kind of wade through all the less than awesome sounds to get to stuff that actually works. But our purposes are pretty general enough that you can find lots of useful material. So below that, we have screenshots of all of the different sounds to give you an indication of what they look like. You can listen to them, like I pointed out earlier, you can listen to them in the session. But what I really want to get to here, actually, putting your sound effects in the game. Remember, there's that folder path that you use to go actually place your sound effects in the game. So before you do your capture, you want to test all of this out to make sure it works. This is really what I want to get at. There are a total of 18 sound effects that you will make for this game. A lot of them can be done with your voice. As you probably have already heard, there's quite a few lines of dialogue in the queue, or what are known as exertions, or vocalizations, things like jumps and ouches and enemy death. So let me do this. I'm just going to play them here, I think. Let's see if I can do this. And play these sounds so you can hear what they sound like. I might turn this down just a little bit just to make sure we don't blow the speakers. Make this too loud. That should do it. Might also turn down my mic a little bit, but here is Bomb Boom. This is when you pick up, there's little parachutes that come down that are bombs, and you either shoot them or you can pick them up and lay different bomb attacks. And here's Bomb Boom. I think that is a ridiculously long bomb sound, about 7 seconds. Pretty long tail, but works out quite well in the game. Bomb fuse. This is when you set the bomb down. It doesn't immediately go off. It takes about a second, and you hear this kind of fuse sound. Does anybody recognize what game that's from? It's actually been used quite a number of times overall. But a really quick kind of sound. It sounds like a charge up sound. If you've ever played Splinter Cell, that's the sound when he flips down the visor. Or if you play Modern Warfare 3, that's in the logo. Oops. Bomb pickup. This is a very abstract kind of gamey sound. It almost can be whatever you want. Maybe. There it goes. Bomb set down. This is a line of dialogue.
Bombs away.
Bombs away. You don't have to say exactly that. You can say that. You can say it in a British accent. You don't have to. You can make up your own line of dialogue, however you want to approach it. Enemy death. These are really easy. So most of these you can just open up your microphone and record and edit them and then test them out in the game. So 3 variations, just some quick grunts for the enemy death. Gunshot. All right, so in the game, it actually looks like he has a bazooka on his shoulder, if he has shoulders, but it's like a bazooka or a rocket launcher. But our gunshot is a gunshot sound, which is perfectly fine. It can sound, I want to say almost anything like, it can sound almost any way that you want, but it needs to have some sort of gunshot, laser, rocket launcher sound. One thing you got to watch out for is that the player can spam the button. They can hit it very, very fast. And you can't really have a very long, that's why they didn't really have a rocket launcher sound. If you had a sound that went and like kind of lighted or lit up and fired, it would just kind of stack on top of each other as they hit the button really, really fast. So you want to avoid that. You want to give it time. Or actually make it a shorter sound overall. This gunshot works because it is quite short, and the player can just hit it over and over again, and it works fine. Health pickup is, again, kind of abstract, more of a pickup, power-up kind of sound. The rest of these are vocalizations. These are jumps, 1, 2, and 3. This is when your character jumps.
Huh. Huh. Huh.
Pretty straightforward there, but it is the jump up part. It is not the land part. Every once in a while, I'll get feet hitting the ground or some other variation of that. This is the up part of your jump. 3 ouches. This is when your character takes damage.
Oh. Ow. Ow.
It's pretty simple there. And 3 taunts.
Keep it classy. Bring it on. I say, O'Bean.
Keep it classy. Bring it on. I say, O'Bean. Right? 3 different lines of dialogue. Again, you don't have to say exactly that. You can write your own lines of dialogue. Just please keep it family friendly, all ages appropriate. But you can still have fun with that. So, relatively simple and straightforward sound design. There's some cool opportunities for interesting sounds. A lot of them can be done with your voice. Record the lines of dialogue, build the sounds, and then bounce and export them out of your DAW and throw them in the game and test out how they might work. All right. Don't save. All right, so we have our 18 sound effects for 2D platformer. We also are going to be doing a game capture. So, as I mentioned earlier, once you are done with your sound design and your revisions and your music composition, once you have all of the assets ready to go, then you can place them in the game. We'll do this again. We'll do show package contents. We'll go to data. Well, I guess we'll do this. It starts out here. Contents. Then we'll go to data. Then we'll go to streaming assets. And you'll place your music and sound effects in these correct folders. If you play the game and it does not work, if you do not hear your music, it is more than likely for reasons that your files are not named correctly, or they are not in the correct sample rate or bit depth, or they mono or stereo. Something with the formatting of the files is incorrect. Double check all of your files and they should work flawlessly. So once you've tested out the game, you made sure everything is working properly for you, then you are going to do a game capture. And with this game capture, you get the game capture PDF, which just kind of shows you a general overview of some of the steps and how to make everything work. But the thing that's probably going to help you the most is going to be the workflow PDF, which is slides step by step of how you are going to build and use everything. So more than likely, well, with this, you are going to use QuickTime to capture the video. More than likely in a previous class somewhere, you've used QuickTime to do either a video, like your webcam capture, like an actual camera video, or you've done a screen capture of your screen at some time. So using QuickTime to do the screen capture portion of this is really not the difficult part. The challenge here is the audio. By itself, if I go into QuickTime and I say I want to do a new screen recording, by itself, the audio is not captured directly inside of the computer. If we turn this on to built-in microphone, it sees my microphone that's on my computer, and it's expecting some source outside of my computer. And you need to be able to record a source inside of your computer, namely the video game. And there's all sorts of reasons that Apple does not want to provide your ability to capture any audio inside of your computer. That could be used for all sorts of nefarious purposes. But for our purpose, it's our music. We created it and put it into the game, and we want to capture the output of the game. So we have to have tools in order to do that. And there is a great, well, I didn't want to do that. There's a great tool involved to allow us to do that called Loopback Audio. And you will use Loopback Audio to capture your audio and video in the same pass. Loopback Audio is free for the purposes that we're using it. It can give you 15 minutes to capture, and you're only capturing a minute or two of the video. It is $99 if you wanted to buy the full version of that, but for our purposes, we do not need to do that. So you will download Loopback. Download and install Loopback. You can find it freely available from Rogue Amoeba's website here. You can do the free download and get you set up with it. Get yourself set up with it. And once you have everything installed, it will look something like this. And I think this doesn't actually exist yet. It starts like this. And you say, I want a new virtual device. What this is, Loopback is basically like a virtual audio cable that connects out of the output of one program into the input of another program, right? Just in the same way as we connect an audio cable. If we want to go from the output of our guitar into the input of our guitar amp, or we want to go the output of our keyboard into the input of our audio recorder into our, what am I thinking of? Audio interface. That's the word I'm looking for. Then we need a cable. A cable transfers audio. Well, if it's inside of our computer, we can use a virtual audio cable or a digital audio cable that allows us to connect the output of something into the input of something else. So I can create a new virtual device, and you want to choose what application it's for. And you'll probably have to select application. I've done this so that my 2D platformer just shows up here. And you want to unmute it. And you want to be able to listen to this through probably your built-in out speakers. And once you have set this up correctly, you can go into QuickTime and you'll see loopback audio. And by selecting loopback audio, it's going to take the output of 2D platformer, which is here, and it's going to go into anything else. And we can use our screen recording application to do that. So the instructions tell you how to go through and set up loopback and then set up a screen capture inside of QuickTime. You want to try to capture just the game screen as much as you can. When you run the application, you get this window that allows you to change the screen size. You can go, if you turn this windowed checkbox off, it'll go full screen. So you want to capture it as best as possible. You can either capture the full desktop or you can just capture the window. If you do QuickTime here, you hit record, maybe. What happened? Close. Let's try that again. Oh. Well, it doesn't like what I'm doing right now. I can't close it or else it'll mess up my broadcast. But when you, I'll show you here. Maybe. There we go. When you hit record, it allows you to select only portion of the screen. There it is. You can drag either a portion of the screen, you can just drag over the window, or you can do a full desktop capture, whichever way you want to approach it. You can change the size of the screen. You hit record, and then you demonstrate the game. Now, for the actual content of the video, I am not grading you on your performance playing the game, getting the highest score or doing well in the game at all. That's not what I'm focused on. I'm not even really focused so much on the content of the video at all. I'm really focused on that you have the ability to get this whole process down, that you can capture both the video and the audio for the game. You have a loopback virtual audio cable set up and everything works properly, because even if the game like skips and stutters a little bit, that's fine as long as the music doesn't or the audio doesn't drop out. But if the capture kind of is a little bit slow overall, that works out for the purposes of this. Now, so you want to take about 60 seconds, maybe 90 seconds to demonstrate everything. Go through a couple of passes of don't just stand there, maybe fight off the enemies for a little bit, or just you can go straight to the bottom and die so that you can hear the ending cues. You want to hear a couple of the intros, a couple of the main loops, a couple of the endings to make sure it all works properly. What else? Exit the game, stop the screen recording, check the screen recording. That's a big one. Anytime that anybody gets a bad grade on this is because they probably didn't actually watch the video, or else they would have seen that there's no audio, right? That's probably the main thing that is missing the most often, is the video is just silent, or you didn't change the built-in input. And I just hear the microphone. I hear somebody breathing in the background and clicking on their keyboard, or their dog barking in the background, or their family talking, or something like that. So always check the screen recording. Make sure everything was recorded properly. You can do things like clear off your desktop to make it as clean as possible, hide the dock, try a high resolution or a low resolution. You're going to post it up on YouTube, and so that you can share it quickly and easily. So you don't have to send the file around. You can just share the link directly. So again, you're going to finish out your music and your sound effects. You're going to place all of the music and sound effects in the game and test it out, make sure it works. Go back and make any changes and revisions if necessary. And I would definitely suggest download Loopback, install it, and just try doing a quick video capture of almost anything. Just as long as the process works, then it's really just playing the game and capturing the best video version as possible. Always record when you're first testing it out, record for like 5 or 10 seconds and then go watch it, make sure it works. I've had a number of people that'll go through and do a 2-minute long video and go back and go, oh, nothing was captured. So you have to make sure that everything is there ready to go. And your final round here, the final assignment, which kind of encapsulates everything in these first 2 weeks, is the composition description. And I'm going to jump over here to FSO and talk my way through this. Actually, I'm going to load this up too. Notice that in week 2 here, the game capture is unweighted. It's mainly because you're not really delivering it here. You're delivering it as part of the composition description. So it is still a graded assignment, just part of this overall. It's the delivery of everything. Your sound design is also delivered here in this first part. And then if there's any changes, their final version. So here, wait, actually I did that over here. Okay. So the composition description, this is taking a lot of the elements that you've built and created and delivering it all in one place, and then giving me an assessment of the work that you've done. So game composition, final delivery. Any changes that you need to make, you can post it up again here to the first question in this assignment. The looping game music final delivery, if there's any changes you need to make to that assignment, you can go ahead and post it up. If you didn't make any changes, please still post it up here. That way I know that that's your final version and it can be counted. You will provide a screenshot of your DAW session, so of your 2D platformer session. Take a screenshot, place that there. Provide the YouTube link to your 2D platformer game capture, so this is where you post the link. Then give me information about the your composition. What's your key, chord progression, scales, and melodies that you used for the different cues? What's the tempo and time signature, so the rhythmic information. What instrumentation did you use? List all the instruments used in the different cues. Why do I have a question that's repeated? Oh, looks like I need to fix that. Instrumentation, tempo, transitions here. You are going to line up the cues back to back to make sure that they all work when played back together. So intros, main loops, and endings, you'll go intro 1 to main loop 2 to ending 3, intro 2 to main loop 3 to ending 1, intro 3 to main loop 1 to ending 2. I can't even say it. Basically, this shows all the different variations. You'll put them all back to back, take a screenshot, listen to them, describe anything that you hear. Describing good things and bad things about it is perfectly fine. Just because you point out a bad thing doesn't mean I'm taking points off. I'm really just looking for your assessment of how, okay, I put it all together. How did it come out? Does it transition well? Does it work? Does it develop and fit together nicely? And then a screenshot of your meters to make sure that the levels are in the correct range. Please give me a meter containing both peak and RMS. It doesn't have to be the logic meter or this logic meter, but probably work out best. All right. So basically, final delivery, ask a couple of questions, basically takes the whole project and summarizes it there. So that's what we have in store for today, for this week. We'll go ahead and wrap it up there. If you have any questions, you can post those up in the chat. But we'll wrap it up there for our session on this Monday afternoon. Again, we will meet on Wednesday for an open session. If you have any questions about your composition, or you just want to meet and discuss any aspect, show up and we have an opportunity for that. Otherwise, thank you very much and have a good rest of your day. I'll see you again on Wednesday. Thanks.